And now for my final just thought. Tell me your kinks.
That's provocative.
No, that's pretty funny. You know what the fuck I do? Hello, and welcome to this week's of Indie Heartbeat. I'm Alex Jebailey.
And I'm Kyle Konsmo.
There you go, buddy. Welcome back. Anyways, so on this week's episode is actually very exciting. I played this game for a few hours this morning, couldn't even get past the first level. But today we have Derek Yu from the Spelunky 2 team, and actually he helped put together the entire game part 1. So let's check out a clip for Spelunky 2.
Dear Anna, if you're reading this, Mom and Dad are somewhere down below. We might even be stuck. Did you see the giant Olmec up on the surface? We've been in the moon for what feels like many months already, but it's hard to tell. Just like before, time and death work differently down here. It feels like we've slipped into another crack in the universe. But also, it's bigger. So much bigger. I'm so sorry we didn't bring you here with us. We were worried it'd be dangerous. And also, we wanted you to finish school. But don't worry too much. We're having fun. There's no need to rush. Remember, it's easier to get hurt if you're not careful. Stay close to Monty and look out for each other. You're strong, Anna, and a natural explorer. I know you'll make lots of new friends along the way. Just remember what we taught you, and you'll be fine. This journey is yours now. Make the most of it, and we'll see you soon. Happy spelunkying!
And we're back. Hey, Derek, how are you today?
Good. How are you? Thanks for having me.
Of course, of course. Now, I'm not going to yell at you of how stressful my morning was playing through the game, but very excited. You know, this just released back in September on PlayStation 4 and PC Steam. How's everything going with you?
Good. I mean, as well as one can say at this time. Yeah. I feel like we got to preface everything these days when people ask you how you are. It's like, yeah, I'm doing good under the circumstances. So, yeah, that's how I'm doing.
Yeah. And when people ask me how's the weather, I'm like, baby, it's COVID outside. But anyways, so visual artist, game designer, writer. I do love all the little clips and storytelling that you have in the game. So the first question, what was it like being a one-man studio basically to release the first one, which was very successful? And how is it different this time working on 2?
So it really started with the freeware version of Spelunky. So before they're named the same, so I call the freeware version Spelunky Classic now, but basically I made just a pixel art version of the game that I released for free on the independent gaming source forums. And I just made that almost entirely myself, except for the music. And I did the programming, I did the art. Like I said, it was all pixel art. I put that out for free and it kind of took off. And then I got the deal with Microsoft to do like a commercial version. And then I made that with 2 other guys. So Andy Hull was the lead programmer for the first Spelunky 1. And Eric Circa, who is the musician. So that game was, it was a pretty stressful development because it was our first console game. I told Microsoft, I was like, yeah, sure, we got it. No problem. I'm going to find someone to do the programming, because they were going off of the, they're basing all of this off of the freeware version that they saw. And it was actually Jonathan Blow, the creator of Braid, who kind of put in a good word for me at Microsoft that hey, this freeware game is cool. I think you should turn it into a commercial game. And so he kind of reached out to them. And then we got that made in a few years. But I think it was pretty tough for a small team like us. We'd never made a console game before. Had to learn a lot of ins and outs, from scratch, but it ended up, working out well. And we were able to make the sequel later. Although Andy ended up working on his own project called Dunk Lords, which is like a cool arcade 2v2 basketball game. So he
Mhm.
wasn't able to help out with the sequel. Um, so for that, I teamed up with Blitworks, who did ports of Spelunky 1 from Xbox and Steam to PlayStation. And
Mhm.
that was cool. That kind of like, working with a bigger team let us expand the game in a lot of ways and add a lot of features that we weren't able to add for Spelunky 1. So that's kind of the way it went. It was like the freeware version of Spelunky, which we call Spelunky Classic, and then Spelunky or Spelunky HD, some people call it, and then now Spelunky 2. So it's had kind of like an interesting history across like the 10 years. It's actually like, yeah, 3-game series now.
Mhm. And then obviously ID at Xbox, I've actually worked with them when I was at Iron Galaxy. So very helpful service, especially releasing indies. Now, when you went over to part 2, were there any like new challenges that you didn't face with the original, or were you guys kind of prepared for everything, just trying to incorporate new ideas? Like any setbacks making part 2 compared to 1 after all that experience?
I'd say overall it was easier just because we had like a well-oiled team at that point because they had done the porting, like I said, for Spelunky to PlayStation. So they were very familiar with the game and the code. And it was, one of the reasons why I reached out to them to work on the sequel. And I don't think I would have pursued the sequel if they hadn't agreed to work on it. And then Eric, who did the music for Spelunky 1, came over for Spelunky 2 also. And so I'd say overall it was a smoother development. I think the team was just much more experienced, and we are building off of the original game, so we kind of had that as a blueprint.
So the lore in this game, which there seems to be a lot of, surprisingly, for the style that you captured this whole game in, it's all kinds of different mythology from it seems like all walks of life. What was it like researching this game and adding all of that different mythos into this one package?
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. I just I had Wikipedia open like all the time, and I just had a lot of fun just diving deep into different mythologies. And honestly, I think seeing the similarities between, a lot of these mythologies over the ages and just, a lot of the common themes, I think, with creation stories like floods and, like the concept of like the mother goddess, like those types of ideas. I think it was cool seeing the common threads and sort of tying them together in this remix of mythology that we made for Spelunky 2. And that was something that, I'd started with Spelunky 1 and expanded and thought about more with Spelunky 2. And yeah, I don't know. I think the cool thing about making games and making art is it feels like you're kind of having a conversation through history, right? Like Spelunky is obviously inspired by all the games that came before it that I played that I was inspired by. It's also inspired by all the mythology that I read about. And yeah, you kind of see, I think, how like ancient stories actually were made in a similar way, right? Like they're stories that were based on stories, and there's remixing and where cultures met and stuff, like their stories was kind of combined. And yeah, it was very cool. I think it felt like, yeah, I felt like I was having this discussion with people from like the recent past, just other game developers, and also just like hundreds and thousands of years ago too.
A lot of knowledge to compact down into one game. I love how well that was done with this one. Uh,
Yeah, I mean, the game's not meant to like, teach you ancient
Yeah.
history like one
yeah.
to one, but I do see that like the fan base, they're interested in, I think, the inspiration for a lot of this stuff. So they will see like, Olmec is one of the bosses, and then they'll figure that that's based on something, or they'll come across it like later and be like, oh yeah, I remember seeing that from Spelunky, and they'll learn a little bit more about the actual history of it. So I think that's cool.
So one of the pieces that's really popular with this game, and I know Alex had a lot of fun back when this one first launched.
Did we lose
Oop,
Kyle?
yep, I think
Oh,
you
you're
lost
there.
me.
No, you're good.
All right, so I'll start with question 4. Sorry.
5. Oh no, 4. You're right.
Yep, thanks. So one of the coolest parts about this game is the co-op element. From Spelunky 1 to Spelunky 2, there's a big disconnect, like you mentioned, this year, not being able to play in person with people. So online cooperative, I hear that's coming down the line, but how hard was it to launch this game with it not being a feature right away?
Yeah, I mean, online multiplayer it's just really tricky, and it was, it's something that was the game was designed for from the starts. But I think, yeah, I think, we had like a bit of a difficult launch with online on PS4. And so for our Steam release, which came later, we decided to just hold back the online for a little bit so that we could basically, yeah, do a lot of the deeper improvements that were required to, to make the experience good. And, it's an iterative process. So, now I think a lot of people are able to play and have a good time on PS4 playing online, and we just want to keep expanding that, to as many people as possible,
Well, it's
everyone
hard.
eventually.
It's hard, right? There's even big companies that struggle with trying to do online play properly. So it's a big feat to do right and to preserve that co-op experience that this game does so well. I wish you all the best of luck in that experience.
Yeah, the co-op is, I think, a really special part of the game. And it's kind of designed to be like, whereas the single player adventure mode is designed to be kind of this more grueling kind of challenge. I think the co-op is meant to be more fun, and we hear a lot of stories from people who, like, parents who play the game co-op with their young children and have a great time with it, or yeah, just like their kids or will play together and have a great time playing co-op because I don't know. I think with Spelunky 2 co-op, it involves a lot of like teamwork, and there's just a lot of talking and yelling, and kind of the chaos that happens in the single player version is sort of multiplied in multiplayer, because you have two people, and just like with the rest of the game, those two characters can interact in a lot of different ways. I think that's one of the things that makes Spelunky unique as a series, and one of the reasons why I wanted to make a sequel so much in the first place is that a lot of roguelikes that came after Spelunky still weren't doing the same things that Spelunky was. And one of those things is just the way everything interacts, right? Like, you can like knock out an enemy, and then you can pick their body up and you can throw it, right? And you can also do that with just random items. And that's like a very roguelike feature that not a lot of action roguelikes sort of took over, or like, were as inspired by. It's this idea that sort of everything in the game interacts in a similar way in a fundamental level, so which leads to all these crazy like combos of things happening in the game, which lead to like these really funny deaths where, like, you know you will throw something and it'll accidentally trigger an arrow trap, and that arrow trap will bounce off the wall and land onto you, and then you'll get knocked onto like an altar and end up sacrificing yourself on accident. So you get these like crazy deaths, and a lot of people like don't uh, like I see a lot of deaths where the streamer or whatever won't even quite understand exactly how they died, and they'll kind of have to like go back into the footage and enhance it to like
I had to
see
ask my stream a couple
exactly.
times today. I'm like, how did I just die? It's like that fell on you. I'm like, oh.
Yeah, it's like these combinations of things where the underlying physics and interactions sort of combine in these funny ways to make it happen.
And the way you're making me think about it is I played a lot of Hades this year. And that's a roguelike where it's your weapons and you're always on the same path of killing enemies. Spelunky, the best way I would explain it to friends, like it's the environment is always changing. So no matter what you're prepared for playing through, something new is going to happen almost every time, which, it can be very stressful, but that's how I would kind of think about it compared to most other roguelites. So, and then comparing part one to part two, what is probably your favorite like mechanic or new weapon or idea that you brought that was new to two? That's your personal favorite.
Yeah, let me see. I mean, the three like main features that I think about with Spelunky 2 are there's like a second layer behind every level, which is kind of hidden. And I thought that was really cool. That might be my favorite just because it really makes it kind of gives the game sort of a third dimension feeling, even though it's still a 2D game, because you can kind of go like back, behind the wall and then walk around and then come out somewhere else in the level. And so that was just like a cool feeling that I wanted to have in Spelunky 2, where it just I think it increases the feeling of like mystery and hidden things going on that you can't see um, as you're playing. And also, it really it made the level design more interesting in the sense that you could kind of create like what are almost like freeway overpasses in the game, because you can kind of like go behind the obstacle in the front layer. So that's pretty neat. I really like that there are mounts now in the game. You can just like find a wild turkey and jump on it and tame it, and then um, you can like cook it later if you want. I that was something that was one of those features that I think hooked really nicely into the already complicated sort of tangle of interactions that we have available in the game. So yeah, those two, and I think just the liquid dynamics would be like the third thing that's really cool about Spelunky 2. That's different in Spelunky 1. We just have much more dynamic and realistic liquid flow in Spelunky 2, which creates these situations that I think are really exciting and just like fun to look at too. You just get like a waterfall of lava that you created yourself, or maybe accidentally from blowing up the level.
So the game's on PlayStation and PC, Spelunky 2, but Spelunky was released on more platforms originally. What was the driving factor for putting the game on PlayStation and PC, and will it be released on more platforms eventually?
Yeah, well, we just started with the platforms that Spelunky 1 um, was on, and we have a good relationship with Sony, and they were actually the ones that put us in contact with Blitworks, or put me in contact with Blitworks initially to do the port to PlayStation. That's how I met Blitworks, and so yeah, we have a relationship there. And for us as a relatively small team, I think it was more important for us to focus on a couple like main platforms in the beginning, but we definitely are interested in porting the game to other platforms in the future.
Very cool. Well, Spelunky, it's been a mainstay in a lot of indie games. They come and go over the years, but Spelunky's been around for a while. What's kind of next? I know you're talking about improving multiplayer, and it's kind of crazy to see. I'm sure you've heard of Parsec and then the Steam Share Play, which actually works well. So people have been kind of taking, multiplayer of their own hands, but what's kind of next for you and the team?
Yeah, I mean, we still have work to do. I think just improving the game, making tweaks here and there. The community is really active and vocal, and has been, I think, having a good time taking part in the continuing development of the game. And yeah, I mean, we will be looking at other platforms in the future. So just I think support on Spelunky 2 and interacting with the fans and community. Maybe running some tournaments and stuff in the future, because Spelunky, when I first made like the freeware version of Spelunky, I didn't think it would be a good speedrunning game because of all the randomization, but it has like a really, really strong speedrunning and like challenge run community, um, with its own website called Moss Ranking. And so, it'd be great to like do more tournaments and stuff for them in the future. Other than that, I'm also working on another project called UFO 50 that's like a collection of 50 sort of alternate reality retro games. It's a 50-in-1 collection of games. And
Nice.
that's mostly a different team, although Eric Circa, the composer for Spelunky and Spelunky 2, is also working with me on that one. And so
That's
I was kind of
awesome.
working on that project concurrently for part of Spelunky 2's development, and I'll probably be transitioning over more, like back to that project as my work with Spelunky 2 starts to wind down somewhat.
Well, congratulations on another great launch. Can you add an easy mode for me, please? No. What you call it? But Derek, it was a real pleasure to have you on. Anything last you want to tell the fans about the game?
No, just I want to thank everybody for playing the game. I want to thank you, for trying it out. The thing I always want to say, because the difficulty is like such a point of interest with Spelunky 2, is that don't focus on beating the game. Like, when you get good enough at the game and you understand it well enough to be able to beat it, the experience is actually not that long. Like, you can beat it in under an hour. So it's really, just about the journey of exploring, learning, and slowly getting better. And so I try to tell people who are, maybe struggling with it or feel like it's too hard, that to, just not focus on beating it, just focus on making a little progress day by day and having a good time. And eventually you'll definitely beat it, because I'm not a, god gamer by any means. And, I did design the games that I can at least, reach the normal ending myself pretty easily. So yeah, keep at it.
Awesome. I definitely will, because my stream was enjoying me watching me die. But thank you so much. Spelunky 2 is already available on Steam and PlayStation 4. As always, please comment, like, and subscribe, and keep following DreamHack Tonight, and enjoy the Thanksgiving weekend.
And quick thank you to our sponsors, Astro Gaming, Simply Nuck, and Blue Microphone. We thank you for your continued support of our shows.
Take care.